Good evening and welcome to the daily Rambam Shiur, 3 Purakim per day, lesson 172, Hilchos Pesulei Hamukdashim from chapter 11 till 13. Today is a very interesting day since in the portion of the Chumash we read today about the two offerings which were brought by Cain and Hevel. While Hevel was bringing from Bechoros Tzoynoi u'mechalveihen from the min hachai, from the living world, Cain was the one who brought from a min hatzimeach, zera pishton, some sort of grains of flax, which is the closest thing of the topic of flour offering, which happens to be the subject of the Rambam of today's. When the Torah speaks and covers the rules of flour offerings in Chumash Vayikro, it starts with the following pasuk: V'nefesh ki sakriv korban mincho. Rashi comments how come the Torah starts only by flour offerings with the word nefesh, and he answers that typically a flour offerings is being brought by only a person who is poor and he cannot afford to bring anything more than this, and therefore Maile Olov Akosuv, the Torah credits and views as he was makriv es nafsho, as he's giving away his own soul in this process. It may explain the amount, the plethora of details which are related to the kashrus, to the qualification of the flour offering. And indeed, the first chapter of today's Rambam, he deals with the different aspects of the flour offerings, the same way as the animal offerings supposed to atone, also a flour offering is atone. Same way as in a animal offerings, only from Kabbalah Vo'ilach is the mitzvah of the kehuno. In other words, it is critical that the kohen will get involved only from the receiving the blood after the behemoth was slaughtered. So similar with the preparation of the flour, the preparation, though ideally it should be done by a kohen, but nevertheless, if a non-kohen have made all the stages until the stage of the kmitzo, the offering will be kosher. From the moment of kmitza on is the fistful of flowers that the kohen takes in order to actually burn it on top of the mizbeach, and after he places it in the mizbeach, then the rest, the leftover of the mincho, would be eaten by the kohanim. The kmitze and also the removal of the lavoino, which is the frankincense that is being mixed in the mincho, must be done by a kohen and with his right hand. As far as location, it must be done in the azor. Any deviation from this requirement may disqualify the offering. The mincho itself must be in a klishores and in a vessel, in a holy vessel, and from that vessel the removal of the levoino and the act of the kmitze must be done. The proportion of the liquid, which in this case is the oil, in comparison to the mincho, so the ratio would be a lug of shemen for every isoin of kemach. Anything that is less then a lug of shemen will disqualify. As far as excessive amount, as long as it doesn't exceed then the double minimum requirement, it will be fine. At the moment that it comes to be 2 lugin and above, or 2 additional kairotin is basically grains of frankincense, anything double the amount will disqualify the mincha. There is one exception of a mincha that cannot be mixed with oil. This is a minchas choite, a person who brings the offering as a chatos cannot be mixed with oil. However, if he mixed it with water, it will be fine, since when the Torah demanded that a minchas choite will be vacharevo, dry, it was mostly requiring it should be dry out of oil, but not necessarily dry out of water. Though that the Torah demands that loi itein oleho levoino, he should not place any levoino on top of this mincha, as long as it is not grinded, he can remove it in case it was mixed already. The actual burning or placing the koimets for the haktore, for the burning, for the consumption of the fire on the top of mizbeach can be done in stages, as long as each and every stage is not less than a kezayis. Salt in the kmitzo is extremely critical, and also very critical that the container would be full. If for one reason or another the container, the klishores, is empty, a person can and should bring more flowers of his own from his own house. The reason that it will be okay as long as the kmitze were not done, because what makes it or breaks it is the kmitze. As long as the kmitze were not done, the opportunity to keep up filling the container still permitted. If for one reason or another the koimetz was tomei, no problem, the tzitz will take care of it. It is important to remember the tzitz is able to take care only of something that became tomei. Another disqualification, for example, yoitze, exited out the jurisdiction, out the territory, the tzitz is not taking care of it, and the korban will be posul. Since primarily the offering of the koimetz on top of the mizbeach is equivalent to the zrike of the dam in an animal offering, and same way that the primary purpose of the sprinkling of the blood in an animal offering was intended to permit the meat of the behemoth for the consumption of the kohanim, same way after bringing the koimetz on top of the mizbeach for the fire consumption, so shiorei hamincho, the rest of the flour offering, can be and should be given for the kohanim to eat. If the shiorei hamincho, which is the part that is made for the kohanim to eat, was becoming tomei, so it's not eatable, so a kmitze should not be done, ideally. Well, if you have done it b'di'eved, it also it atones for the kohen, but ideally he should not be done. If, however, something was left from shiorei hamincho, from the part that the kohanim will consume, he should bring the koimetz for the fire consumption. However, this leftover or the partial leftover cannot be eaten by the kohanim, since it is specified in the Torah, "V'hanoiseres mimeno yoichlu Aaron uvono," v'hanoiseres, whatever is left over from the koimetz, Aaron uvono v'yochluhu, says whatever is left from the koimetz, but not whatever is left from the leftover. Lo hanoiseres min hanoiseres. If there is a partition in the bottom of the container where the mincho is, so therefore the actual isoin is not bekli echod, though that on the above they may not be any partition and they are blended together in the upper part of the container, but since at the lower part of the container there is a partition, so it disqualifies the minche for the koimetz. However, if it goes the opposite, they may be separated in the top of the kli, and yet in the bottom of the container they are blended, so then he can go ahead with the kmitze. Towards the end of the chapter, the discussion is around ta'arives, a mixture of two different koimetzes, fistful of the flowers that were mixed with each other. He can go and bring both of them for the fire consumption of the Mizbeach, since both of them are going to the Ishim, to the fire, so it's not a problem. However, if what was mixed is not just the koimetz, but the entire mincho, the entire container which contains both the part of the Mizbeach and the part of the Kohanim, they were mixed with each other. As long as he is able to detect and to identify the koimetz which belong to each and every mincha separately, he can go ahead and make the koimetz. If he cannot go and identify to which mincha this particular koimetz belong, he is disqualified to make the kmitzah. The summary of the second chapter of today's shiur deals about the shiurim, the measurement, when it comes to shtei halechem, the two breads that were brought on Shavuos, the oimer atnufo, the bundle that was offered on the second day of Pesach, where the Sfiras Oimer starts from, and the lechem aponim, which were brought every week. Their measurement are very precise. Any deviation from their measurement, even on a fraction, will disqualify them. However, it is important to note that disqualification will be effective as long as the blood of the korban that accompanies them were not sprinkled. But let's say they were in a perfect measurement until the point of the sprinkling of the blood of the korban that accompanying them, and only after the sprinkling of the blood, only then a shiur, their measurement were reduced. In such a case, there is no problem and the process will remain kosher. There is another korban which is called korban toido. It's so much again connected with these days. If a person were saved or from a very dangerous disease, or from jail, or from a desert, or from a travel over a sea, so then he brings a korban toido with chalois toido, which is for the chalois. When we have learned Maaseh Korbanos, we covered that the types of chalo, while 30 of them are matzo and 10 of them are chometz. So there the sprinkling of the blood will determine, and for that reason, if the measurement of the chalois was missing after the sprinkling of the blood, it's fine. If it will done before, then it's a problem. When we say that any toido, any korban toido, any Thanksgiving offering should come with bread, it is important to note that only on the korban toido itself. But let's say a vlad of a toido, a vlad is a fetus, or temuras toido, when a person exchange the toido in another animal, or another form of alternative toido where a person designated a toido and he lost it and he designated another one and he was already atoning or taking care, slaughtering the first one, and suddenly there is the other one in front of him. So each and every one of those three cases is different formats of not the real thing, but the reflection, the exchange, the tmur, the any so-called not the toido, but a reflection or a tmuras toido, exchange of a toido, alternative of a toido, does not require bread. However, it is also important to note that sometimes by introducing the difference between an edovo and an eder, I'll give you an example. When a person say that it is upon myself to bring a korban toido, it's called an eder, and in such a case he will be liable to bring an eder, bring a toido in case the first one were lost. In such a case, when he actually delivers the alternative toido, then it will be considered tmuras toido, which lechem not going to be required. However, if a person said harei zu toido, and he will be exempt from delivering a new toido, and yet voluntarily he brought a new toido, so this is not considered a tmuras toido. It is considered like a new toido, and as such he will have to bring also lechem, also bread with the new toido. When there is a mixture between the toido and the tmur, between the original toido and the alternative toido, and one of them died, and I have no idea what is the leftover, whether it is the original toido or this is the alternative toido. Now, the original toido needs to be brought with lechem. The alternative toido cannot be brought with lechem. And I don't know what to do. If I will bring this particular leftover with bread, who knows? Maybe this is the alternative toido that exempt from bread. And if I'm going to bring it without bread, who knows? Maybe that is the toido that requires bread. So in such a case, the solution, like in many other cases, ir'e ad sheipel b'mum. I will let it go until a defect, a damage, a blemish will appear, and then it won't be able to be subject to korbanos. I will sell it, take the money, purchase a new animal, and I will bring it without a toido. And the reason, because some of the Meforshim explaining that it will be considered then moisal toido. And moisal toido is always brought without a lechem, without a bread. In the relationship between toido and the bread, it is important to remember that the bread comes as an attachment to the toido and not the opposite. And from that perspective, there is a derivative of two dinim, two halachos. For example, if a person said, Zu toido vezu lachmo. This is the toido and this is the lachmo. And as we have learned, any type of a commitment by saying harei zu will take away any liability from the person who committed in case this one were lost. Because einoi chayav be'achroyus, he is not liable in case he said harei zu. So for example, if he said zu toido vezu lachmo, if the toido, the actual animal, were lost, he is not liable. But if the animal were not lost, but the bread were lost, though he said harei ze lachmo, nevertheless he will be liable. Reason, because the toido is here. You cannot bring a toido without a lechem. The lechem is the attachment to the toido, and always it needs to be attached. Another illustration of this principle, if a person designated cash towards toido and there is leftover, so he can use the leftover to buy the bread, because by saying toido, you already imply a inclusion of the bread in the toido. However, if a person designated money for lechem and there is leftover, he cannot go and purchase with the leftover the animal for the actual korban toido. Reason, because the animal is not included in the bread, but the bread is included, is an attachment, is a tofel to the animal. The amount of the chalois is 40 is very, very critical. Even if one chalo was broken, it will disqualify all of them. However, if a disqualification of other breads were as a result of yoitze, left the territory of the Beis Hamikdash, or became tomei, it won't disqualify the other. The location of the bread must be in a very close proximity to the location of the shchito. Not too close, as long as the bread is in the territory of Har Habayis, then it will be sanctified. However, if it is outside the territory of the Har Habayis at the time when the toido is being slaughtered, so then the lechem, the bread, is not being sanctified. If the korban were disqualified because of machsheves hazman, which we will learn in the next chapter, is considered to be pigul. So still the bread will be sanctified. However, if the animal turns out to be treif or he shechted sheloi lishmo, then the lechem is not sanctified. The third chapter, dealing with those items which will disqualify a korban just by the wrong thought of the kohen. If the kohen had, while he is doing 4 activities, which is the activity of shchito, the slaughtering, the activity of kabbalas hadam, collecting the blood in the vessel, walking with the blood towards the mizbeach, and sprinkling the blood. It's called in Hebrew shchito, kabolo, hoiloche, uzriko. When it comes to a bird offering, so only through the process of meliko, which is equivalent to shchito, and in the process of mitzui hadam, which since in a oif there is no kabolo in a kli, so basically the introducing or placing the blood on the corner, on the mizbeach, mitzui hadam. And when it comes to the kmitzo, there is in a flower offering, so the activities of the actual kmitze, placing it in a klishores, hoilocho is walking, and the actual zriko, putting it on top of the mizbeach for the fire to consume it. So if a person managed to have the wrong thought throughout one of those 4 avodos, then the korban will be posul or pigul. So we're going to start what type of wrong thought is necessary in order to turn the offering into a psul. So there is 3 types of thought that will disqualify the korban. The first thought, it's called machsheves shinui Hashem, a name change. A name change whether he was thinking the korban is on behalf of the wrong person, not that person that he is actually contributing the korban, but a different person. There is another possibility of Shinui Hashem, when he has in mind, when the korban is a oilo, he is mixing or adding or prioritizing a different korban. Instead of a korban oilo, he thinks a shlomim, or oilo ushlomim, or shlomim ve'oilo. That's those, as long as he change from the name of the core definition of the korban. Then there is another type of a shinui, which is shinui hamokim, that he, throughout those activities that we have mentioned, he had in mind to sprinkle the blood or to burn the fats or to eat from the flesh of the korban outside their ideal territories where they should be sprinkled or consumed or eaten. Any type of korbanos that he was thinking this thought throughout the process of those 4 activities, it will be defined as zvochim shenishchatu chutz limkoimon, the offerings which have been slaughtered outside their territory, although physically they slaughtered in their territory, but since their thought while they were slaughtered or have done those activities, they had the wrong thought, will make the korban posul. Then there is machshev shinui hazman, when a person was slaughtering the offering for the sake of the offering, but with the purpose to, or again, sprinkle the blood outside the time, which is after shkia, or burn the imuim after alois hashachar of tomorrow, which again outside the expiry date of this korban, or to sprinkle the blood after the shkia, or to eat the korban for an extra day. These are illustration of zvochim shenishchatu chutz lizmanom, and they are called pigul. They are much more severe consequences, as we will learn later, to pigul over just pasul. However, it is important to remember that those requirements which are necessary to make and to put the zvochim into this status are very critical, because any deviation outside of those requirements are not going to disqualify the korban. For example, a person can think about the wrong thoughts, but it's not going to be strong and powerful enough to turn the korban into a pasul. A person, for example, one classical example that the Rambam extends a lot, if a person having in mind not to throw the blood outside the territory or outside the time, he has in mind to place it pleasantly in a nice way outside the time and outside the place. Though it is a wrong thought, but this wrong thought are not going to qualify to be within the parameters of machsheves hazman and machsheves hamokim. Another example he brings, he have in mind in a korban Pesach to eat it no and mevushol and so on. Again, he may be doing the wrong thing, but not wrong enough in order to turn it to a pigul or a pasul dike korban. So in the next coming few days, we will elaborate more on the principles and more in the illustration of how and what is necessary to make a perfect pigul and a perfect psul, and how complex and not as easy as it sounds at the first glance. Thank you very much, and we should have just Pesulei. All the best.